One of the most common things I see on places like Reddit, in the r/MSP subreddit, and kind of elsewhere when I talk to MSPs is, I'm just kind of getting started, or I've started an MSP, or my favorite is I've accidentally started an MSP. And now what do I do? Like, how do I grow my business? What do I need to do to be successful? All of those kinds of things. If that happens to be you, this video is right up your alley. Starting a new MSP can be quite an adventure. And this video's aim is to make it a little bit easier for you to kind of get things up and running. My name is Adam Hanneman. Welcome to Ramblings of a Geek. I've been in the MSP space for the better part of a couple decades, and this video is really near and dear to my heart because I definitely did this back in the day. So if I think back to when I started my MSP way back in the late 90s, it was actually before the term MSP was really coined. And so I was a computer consultant and I was doing things, and I was sort of the accidental MSP, which is why I think it's kind of funny when I see it on Reddit. What do I mean by accidental? Well, back when I was working corporate IT back in those days, I was working for a stock brokerage firm and I supported a lot of stockbrokers in their daily lives. And part of what we did back then was they actually had a work computer and they had their own personal computer typically on their desks. Not everybody, but many did. And so over the course of months and a couple of years, I started kind of helping them with their personal stuff, and eventually I started charging them for it because ultimately it became a bigger and bigger thing. And so that's how I accidentally became an MSP back in the day. I was a solid tech. In fact, I was a pretty darn good tech. But I was not a business person, and I didn't know any of the business side of the world. And so I started this MSP without any of those skills, which is pretty typical for what I talk to MSPs today, right? Many MSPs don't know a whole lot about how to run a business. They are good on the technical side, not so good on the business side. And that's just the thing that I think is kind of carries through over the decades. I kind of tried to grind my way through those early stages, had limited success. Ultimately, after my wife and I had a couple kids, we had to move back across the country to be closer to family. I sold the clients of that business over to another provider in the area, and kind of walked away from the MSP space for a little bit. And then over the course of the next couple decades, I've been in and out of a number of different MSPs, large and small. So I know what it's like to have all of this energy, and I'm going to build up this new business. I'm going to be my own boss and all of those things, and I'm really excited for it. I also know what it's like to say, gee, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pay my rent this month because a client hasn't paid me on time, right? I know what on both sides of the world are. And it's really important that as you build up your MSP, you grow your business skills. And that's why I'm creating all these videos, is to kind of help with that. On today's video, I'm going to cover the top 6 things that I would suggest that you pay attention to. Now, this is a little bit different than if I was going to start a new MSP today. I might do things in a little bit different order, but that's because I'm coming to this with a lot of experience. Throughout this video, I'm going to mention a number of different things, and there's going to be some resources and links to different videos, different websites, and those kinds of things. I'm going to put those all in the description, so the description is going to be a little bit longer than normal, so that way you don't have to go, rewind back and forth. You can actually just hit all the links down below. Let's talk about the top 6 ways for you to grow your MSP. The first item of business is you got to take care of the business stuff. You have to understand what kind of business structure you're going to use. I would not recommend being a sole proprietorship. That leaves too much risk on the table for you as a business owner. Most MSPs start off as an LLC or maybe an LLP, depending on whether they have a partnership or not. But the ultimate thing here is you want to understand what that looks like, get it figured out, and file the right paperwork and all of those things with your location. Now, the other piece is you might have some tax consequences you might need to figure out. So you might need to talk to a CPA to get some ideas around this. There's a website from the SBA, the Small Business Administration, that talks about the different structures. I'll link that below in this video. The second item of business is you got to get your accounting package figured out. You have to get your bank accounts in order and those kinds of things. As a small business owner, you need to understand finance to a certain degree. You need to understand whether you're making money or not, how the finances are working, but you don't need to become a CPA. But you do need to do a few different things. The first thing is you got to get some bank accounts in order. I would strongly recommend that you talk to a business banker and have them help you with that. You'll need to seed them with some of your own money. So kind of figure some of those things out. So the second part of this finance side of the world is that you must have a financial or accounting package in your business, and you need to use it. It's just a cost of doing business. And the reality is that you sign up for it. I would probably just do a cloud version. And you want to set up a couple different items in your chart of accounts. I'll link up above to the Finance 101 topic where I talk a lot about chart of accounts and those kinds of things. But ultimately, you just need to get that in, get it figured out, because you're going to be invoicing out of this for quite a while. In fact, you're going to be tracking time in your accounting package for a little bit as well, because it's one of those things that you just want to get up and running, and you want to start billing, and you want to start getting paid. Eventually, you're going to hand off a lot of this kind of day-to-day accounting stuff off to a bookkeeper, but not on day one. So get used to it, figure it out a little bit, get good enough at it. And really the key here is building a very normal routine for invoicing. Invoice on the second or third of the month or something like that, and do it every single month. Don't invoice like every 3 to 5 months and it's kind of random, because that's a whole lot harder to get paid that way. If you invoice every single month on X day, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So get in a habit of doing that well up front. There's a couple other items that relate to finance that I think are worth talking about. The first one is make sure that you are dealing with your sales tax appropriately. Every locale is a little different, so understand the rules in your state, city, and those kinds of things. The second piece is make sure you're setting aside money for paying your income taxes, because you don't want to have to figure out how to come up with some cash to cover your quarterly taxes. Just don't get behind on those kinds of things. That's just not worth the time, effort, and hassle. Ultimately, this kind of early business stuff is a little bit of bootstrapping, right? You're trying to figure things out as you go, and you're trying to make sure that you're making enough money to get by. It all gets a little easier once you have a couple clients, so just know that it's going to be a little bit of a struggle right away, but should get easier over time. Now, this is also another area where if you are working on like a day job and this is your side gig, you're able to kind of put some additional cash into the business as you need to. Managing cash flow is another thing that's fairly important, especially early on. So be mindful of those kinds of things. Pay attention to the finance. Again, you don't need to be a CPA, but you do need to be good enough. Third big item is get your pricing figured out as early as you can. And know it's going to change over time, but you want to figure it out pretty early, because it's pretty easy to start your business off making nowhere near enough money. And so don't be that person if you can avoid it. I talk about this a lot in that pricing video that I recorded a few months ago. I'll link that above and below as well. And the short version is you need to understand your cost of goods sold and then build margin on top of it. Rather than rehashing the whole video here, I would just recommend that you check that video out. The other piece as it relates to pricing that I don't really cover in that video is your hourly rate. Your hourly rate is really important to get figured out. I'm going to suggest that your hourly rate probably needs to be at least $150 an hour or more, right? It needs to be sizable enough to matter. You are an expert in this industry. You are an expert on the technical side of the world. Get paid like an expert. For reference, back in 2007, I think I was only charging $95 an hour, and I was undercharging back then. A lot's changed in the ensuing 17 or so years, so make sure that you're charging something reasonable. And absent any other information that you can lean into, I would start at $150 an hour and adjust as you go. Now, I will do a little bit more research and kind of dig into some of this hourly pricing stuff in a future video, but know that if you're around $150 an hour, you're doing just fine. The fourth big thing is get your domain name, your website, and email all dialed in. Let's start with the domain name. I think you should have an easy to spell and as short of a domain name as possible. Too often I see real long domain names. It's so easy to mistype those long domain names when someone's trying to send you an email, when they're trying just to go to visit your website and those kinds of things. So make sure you have that figured out. Then you want to make sure you have email, right? Your email needs to work. It needs to be accessible to you. I might also create a support at email address, and even if that is just an alias that links to your main email address, get your clients used to emailing that support email address versus emailing you directly for those kinds of things. The third thing is your website. Your website needs to be good enough. It basically just can't suck. And what I mean by that is it needs to basically be your digital business card. It needs to talk about who you are, the basic services you offer without getting too jargony and talking about all the different tools and stuff you use, and make it painfully obvious for people to be able to connect with you, right? Make your contact information so obvious that anybody can find it when they go to your website. Also at this point, I wouldn't spend any money on SEO. Make sure things are spelled correctly, make sure that the content is good enough. In fact, you could use one of the GPT models out there to generate some of the copy. Obviously, fact check it and do all those other things, but you don't need to get crazy with it right now, because you're not likely to get a whole lot of business from people hitting up your website in this early stage anyway. If you're getting value out of this video, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. The next big ticket item is get some contracts in order. And this is an area I totally whiffed on when I was doing my own thing back in the day. I think I eventually sort of had a one-page thing that says, I'm going to do some work and you're going to pay me. It was very, very basic. In today's world, the security side of the world and all of those other pieces are just too important to skimp out on. So this is one of those areas where I might spend a few extra bucks on it, but you need a couple different contracts. The first contract you're going to need is a master service agreement, right? That's your business relationship document. The second contract I think you're going to need is basically the services contracts that you're going to use, right? And I think you want to kind of build those out that way. The other piece is if you have a business partner, you need some sort of partnership agreement, shareholder agreement, or whatever, however you've orchestrated your company. Make sure you have that agreement that tells you and your business partner or partners who's responsible for what, how the partnership is formed, and how it's going to break up later on. It's basically your business prenuptial agreement. It's so vital to have that every MSP that I've talked to that doesn't have one has regretted it. So make sure you have that in place if you have a business partner or two. So as it relates to all this legal stuff, there are 3 different services that I will link below in the description that I personally recommend, and I would vouch for each of the 3 of them as it comes. So just know that those links are below in the description. The next big ticket item is building up your prospecting engine. Most MSPs, as they start by word of mouth, right? And that's the easiest, most effective way to grow your business, especially when you're trying to get up off the ground. Make sure your friends and family know that you're starting a business, and then if they have people that they can recommend you talk to, make sure that you have that figured out. I would make sure your friends and family and people you're talking to know that you support this type of business, right? Versus home users and just kind of anybody with a computer. But I wouldn't get too in depth with target client profile right off the jump. At this point, I think you're just trying to cast a wide net, catch whomever you can. Target client profile comes in just a little bit. You tell people that you are starting a business and your friends and family know about it. Go join a networking group or two. Start getting out there in the community and start building up your business network. It's really important to build these relationships because our business is not transactional. It really is relationship based. So start building those relationships. It's really critical for your business. Then as you start to meet prospects and get to know them a little bit, get to understand their business a little bit, they get to understand your business a little bit, you're going to start closing some deals. And when you do that, I wouldn't get too worried about your proposals and stuff. You can iterate on this fairly easily. Basically, you take the contracts that you had built or built for yourself, take the pricing, and build out some version of a proposal. It doesn't need to be perfect. And in fact, it can be a page or two. It doesn't need to be this long, drawn-out thing because at this stage, you're just trying to close some business and you're trying to get some clients in the door. You build out a proposal, you present it to a prospect, and you're going to start closing deals, right? You're not going to close them all, but you're going to close quite a few because, again, word of mouth is a far easier close than cold call, for example. And so you close a couple clients and you learn some stuff from that process, and you're going to iterate that process over time, make it easier on yourself. But on day one, I'm not spending a ton of time on that. You might notice I haven't mentioned PSA or RMM at all yet. And ultimately, I don't think you need a PSA when you are very first getting started. Getting a PSA is really important, and you're going to want it at some point. I might have a couple clients before I invest in that system because, and you're going to hear me say this every time I talk about a PSA, is that you do not want to just sign up for a PSA and do a self-implementation. You're not going to be an expert on it, and it's really important to get it done right. So not only do you need to be able to pay for the PSA piece, but you also need to pay for the implementation of it as well. So make sure that you have a plan for that eventually, but it doesn't need to be done on day one. You can track your time and invoice right out of your accounting package. And again, ultimately, you will have a PSA for that, but not right away. Now, on the other hand, RMM is one of the things I would probably do pretty quickly with one caveat. I don't want to overpay for my RMM. So if your RMM choice allows you to bill by technician or allows you to have a smaller device count as the licenses you're paying for, I might pick it. But if it requires you to have 100 licenses for your RMM right away, I'm not sure it's worth it right away. So make sure that you pick a tool that will allow you to be small and scale. And eventually you might change RMMs, but that's a tomorrow problem for tomorrow, not for a today thing. There are a lot of other things that you can do and spend time on, but these are the top things I would absolutely dial in on because I think it's really important to do these things right. Had I been ready and willing to listen when I started, it would have made my life a lot easier. A lot of these resources weren't here then either, right? Peer groups were kind of new. There really wasn't a whole lot of curriculum to start a business, at least not that I found anyway. So just know that there are resources out there now that can help you. Now, one of the resources, and one that is near and dear to my heart, is the flight plan peer groups at PAX 8. That's an offering that we've built specifically with the small MSP in mind, right? If you're an owner operator, very small MSP, we actually have a whole curriculum put together to get you from $0 to $1 million. It's a program that we run on a regular basis, and if you have any interest in that, please do let me know. With all of that, starting your MSP can be quite an adventure. It can be also a very rewarding adventure. So if this is you, get out there, close some business, begin your adventure, and you're going to be just fine. Thanks for coming on this ramble with me, and I hope to see you on the next one.